Nothing says summer like a beautiful flower garden. And today on Stamp TV, I'm going to show you a bright and cheerful flower garden background that is the perfect summer backdrop for any card project. Let me show you the tools and products you need to do this card. First, you're going to need some ink, and I am using a few of the Gina Designs ink colors. I'm using Passionate Pink, Fresh Asparagus, Cherry Red, Bubblegum Pink, and Black Onyx. You're also going to need a sponge dauber to apply a little bit of the ink. You're going to need some brads, and I have a few of the white brads from the new Days of Summer Stamp TV kit, and also a craft pick and some sort of mat or a piece of mouse pad like I have here. You're going to need some ribbon, and I'm using two ribbons from the new Days of Summer kit. I'm using the Passionate Pink double stitched and the Black Onyx gingham. You're going to need a couple dies or punches. I'm using two Spellbinders dies, the standard circles and the standard scalloped circles. I'm also using some 1/4" pop dots. And then I have the tonic ticket tag punch and a little bit of adhesive and some scissors. And then I'm using stamps from two of the small mini stamp sets from the new Days of Summer Stamp TV kit. I'm using some of the floral images from Summer Blooms and then one of the greetings from A Wish for You. So to begin, I'm going to start by making the background. That's my big focal image piece. And I'm going to use some Gina Designs cardstock for this. I'm going to use some of our white cardstock, our Black Onyx cardstock, and our Passionate Pink cardstock. And for those of you that noticed the change in my mat, I just want to tell you that this is the scor-pal mat. It is a wonderful mat. It sticks to your work surface and doesn't move around, which I just love. And it feels like it's laminated on top. So if you get any ink or any glue or anything onto the mat, it will just wipe clean. So for those of you that are wondering what this is, it's the new scor-pal mat. Okay. So I'm going to start with a variety of the different flowers. You can see I store all of my stamps on the storage panel, the binder sheet that comes inside the Days of Summer Stamp TV kit. I use both sides for the different stamp sets. And I'm going to use some of the different flowers from the set. And then I'm also going to use this cute little leaf element. And then I'm going to use this birthday greeting from the A Wish for You stamp set. So I'm just going to start with that one actually and give that a chance to dry for a couple minutes. I'm going to grab a scrap piece of white cardstock and some of our black ink, and I'm going to stamp this greeting onto this piece of white paper cardstock, and I am going to stamp it in the middle because I'm going to be cutting it out with a die, and I want to make sure that I have enough clearance around the whole thing. So I'm just going to put that aside and close up this black ink pad because that's all I need that for. And now I'm going to start to create this background. I'm going to start with the biggest stamp. This is somewhat of a dandelion looking stamp, kind of like the skeleton ones that you see everywhere. And I'm going to make this particular flower bubblegum pink. I want to start with my lighter pink. Now there's a certain pattern that I always use when making backgrounds, and it keeps my backgrounds very even and very fluid. And although you might not notice it when you're looking at the background, if you do your background this way, you'll never worry about having a weird open space that you didn't intend to be there. So what I do is I take my biggest stamp first, which is this flower, and I'm going to stamp it right in the middle of the piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to stamp one staggered up here, and I'm going to turn the stamp, and one staggered up here. So I have one in the middle and then two up there, and I'm going to do two down here as well. Now you can see I don't have them lined up exactly the same, and I've turned the stamp so it doesn't look too patterned. but they are making this kind of pattern, kind of a V here and a V here, and then a V here. So there is my first 5 blooms that I've stamped. Now, to make this look like actual pattern paper, it's very important to stamp off of your piece of cardstock. So I'm just going to grab some paper to stamp on, and although I can stamp right on this mat, I don't have a paper towel with me to clean up, so I'm just going to grab a piece of extra paper here to stamp on, and I'm going to take some of these blooms off of the cardstock like that, and I'm turning them as I go, like that, and like that. So there, now I have a pattern of these dandelion blooms. Now my next stamp I'm going to use is this smaller flower, and I'm going to do that one in the passionate pink. So this one I'm going to fill in kind of in between, but this one doesn't have to be quite so patterned, but I'm going to fill in a lot of that empty space. So I'll put one here, and I'm not afraid to stamp over the colors that are already there. Put one here, one here, and I am turning this stamp a little bit as I go so that all the petals aren't exactly in the same spots. Now I'll take one over here and one down here. So you can see I'm kind of filling in, kind of getting an even pattern, but not so regimented that it looks too much like a grid. One there. And I can take one here if I want, like a little bit of one, and maybe one down here the same way. So that's my second flower. Now for my third flower, it's going to be this really tiny little one. And to really make that little one stand out, I'm going to do it in my brightest pink-red color, and that's going to be the cherry red. So this one is going to really fill in a lot of these other areas, and it'll really stand out because it's so much brighter, even though it's tiny. And again, you can see I'm stamping in somewhat of a pattern, but not so much of a pattern that you can tell it's a pattern. And turning the stamp as I go really does help to eliminate that look of it being too symmetrical. Maybe put one more like right about here, one off the cardstock there, and that'll do it for that one. Now I'm going to add a little bit of green into it, and that's where it's really going to come to life and feel a lot more like a garden, although that is very, very pretty. And if you are doing just a pink card, maybe for a younger girl or something like that, and you wanted to really stick with just the pinks and the reds, you could stop here and it's a beautiful background. But because this is a garden, I do need a little bit of green, so I'm going to bring in some of the fresh asparagus ink on this little leaf element. And I'm going to stamp this leaf coming off of the different flowers that I stamped in the passionate pink. So I'm going to make sure that I hit different sides of the flowers. And it's pretty easy to line up because there's a little bump that sticks out, and that just goes in between the petals, but it doesn't have to be very precise. It'll still look pretty no matter where you stamp it. And you can see I'm just filling in lots of green all around. And if you see a spot that needs something, you can always go back and add. I think we need something in here, so I'll add another leaf. These backgrounds are so much fun to make, too. They just get prettier and prettier as you add different elements. And remember, you can see that I'm stamping off of the cardstock in certain areas, and that's what you want to do to make it look like real patterned paper. do a couple more. I'll do one here and one right in here. And I think I'll put one there too. You can kind of just step back and look at it and say, okay, does it need anything else? Yeah, I think maybe it needs something up here, and then just add a little bit more to it. So there is my beautiful flower garden. You can see how pretty that came out. Isn't that nice? And it doesn't look overly organized. It looks very much like it's random, but there really isn't any dead space or white space that you have to worry about. It makes it look very much like well-designed pattern paper. So this is going to be adhered to this piece of black onyx cardstock, but first I'm going to notch the corners with the tonic ticket tag punch. And there's two little guides on this punch on each side depending on what type of corner you want. And you just slip the paper in and press it up against those guides. And once it's kind of pressed into place, you punch down, and that gives you that little notch. And that is the perfect little notch to fit our brads that we add to our Stamp TV kits. So this is kind of a must-have tool for me. I love this tool, and I love to use it for doing notches, not just on the background pieces, but also on some of my focal image pieces. So I'm going to adhere those two pieces together, and then we're going to get to the focal image. So when you're putting pieces like this together, it might take an extra second or two to really make sure that it's straight, because those notches can kind of draw your eye. So there we go. Now I'm going to add those brads, and the way I'm going to do that is just to take, I have a little piece of mouse pad here and the Tim Holtz craft pick, and let me grab a few of these brads out of here. I brought a couple extra in case I drop one. So I'm going to poke a hole in the corner and pop the brad in. Kind of hard to see when you're holding it up against black. Let me move it over a little. There we go. Okay, so there's my first brad, and I want to show you what I do with the extra. Because I like this 1/8 of an inch border, a lot of times when you add a brad to a border like that, you'll have that little end that sticks out. You can see that right there. Well, what I do is I just take my Tim Holtz scissors and I slip them under there, and I close my eyes and I cut. And you always want to close your eyes because you never know where that little point is going to shoot. So make sure you keep your eyes closed when you actually cut. But that just gets rid of that little piece, but the brad is still secured on the back. So I'm going to pop the rest of these in quickly here to add that little touch of elegance. I like the brad corners. I think that they add a little bit of interest, but they're very tasteful. It's not too much bling on your card. And they really don't add a ton of bulk either. They're not very high. They don't raise up very high off of the card, so it doesn't usually cause any problems when you're mailing them. And here goes the last one. And then I'll just trim those little ends off. Okay, that's one. And this one. And the last one. That one's not even so bad. There we go. Okay. So now my card panel here, this panel that's going to go onto my card base, is just about done, other than a little ribbon, which I'll show you in a minute. Now let's get back to this greeting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this greeting out using the Cuttlebug and those dies that we talked about, the Spellbinders dies. I'm going to start with an A and a B plate, and then my piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to grab that plain oval die and line that up so that looks nice and straight. And then I'm going to do a C plate on top to cut it. That'll be my first part. If you're new to the Cuttlebug and die cutting, you might hear some cracking and popping when it goes through your Cuttlebug. Don't worry about that. That is a normal sound. Next, I'm going to flip it over and lay the rubber mat on top because I'm going to emboss that little edge using a B-plate and a piece of chipboard. Now, every Cuttlebug is calibrated a little bit differently, so your Cuttlebug may not need a piece of chipboard to get enough pressure to emboss. It might just need a piece of cardstock. It might not need anything. So try it first, and then you can add thinner layers at a time up until you get up to chipboard if that's what you need. So I'm going to leave this in the die, and I'm going to cut a scalloped one in our black onyx cardstock. That's an A and a B plate, and then a C plate on top. And that is ready for my card. So before I add this greeting to my card, I'm going to take the greeting while it's still in the die, and I'm going to grab a little bit of this bubblegum pink ink and that sponge dauber. And I'm going to rub the dauber over the ink to pick up a little bit of ink. And starting off of the die, I'm going to start in a circular motion because I just want to add a little soft pink shadow around the perimeter to make that white stand out. So you can see how I did that. Let's go a little closer so you can see the rest. Just coming in a little bit. And the reason why I start off of the die and not right on the die is because this way the movement doesn't allow you to see a big round circle of ink from the sponge dauber where I started. You can see some of those over here. You don't want that on your greeting. So by starting off of the die, I'm just getting that little bit of shadow of ink in there. And it may not look like much there, but wait till I take it out of the die. You'll be able to really see it. There you go. Isn't that pretty? And that is going to go right on top of this black oval that I cut out earlier, the scalloped oval. And we're going to add a little ribbon, and this card will be ready to send. Okay, so there is my greeting, and I like the fact that it's a little bit of a bolder greeting, because when you make a background like this, it's so beautiful, you really don't even need to add a focal image. It's just so pretty, you want to see that. But it's nice to have some sort of focal image, and in this case, we're making the greeting the focal image. Now, before I assemble all this together, I'm going to add 2 little strips of ribbon. And this came about this afternoon when I was making this card. It came about because I couldn't decide whether I wanted to use the passionate pink ribbon or the black gingham ribbon. And I said, you know what, I can't decide. I'm just going to use both. So we're going to start by applying the black gingham. And we do that by flipping it over and adding a little bit of tape onto the back. And then make sure that that's positioned straight. And now we're going to do the same thing with the pink right above it. So we're going to have 2 little rows of ribbon. And you know, after I did this, I thought, why don't I do that all the time? It's so pretty, and it allows you to add a little bit more color and use up a few more small strips of your ribbon in a really fun way. So I kind of like this double ribbon band going around the card. Okay, so there's my double ribbon band. Now let's get this panel onto the card base with a little bit of adhesive. And I always put a little extra over the ribbon just to make sure it doesn't come up. So this piece will go onto the card base. And then my final step is going to be to add this greeting. Now I really don't want to smash down that ribbon. I want it to be raised up just a little bit. I'm going to do that by using some 1/4-inch pop dots, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. This way that will kind of straddle the ribbon and it won't squash it down at all, and it'll give the card a little bit more interest because you've got a raised element on there. Let me get rid of these little things. And then, rather than putting it in the center, I'm just going to offset it a little bit. It'll go right onto the side here. Let me make sure that looks straight. And there is my beautiful garden finished card project. Flowers are perfect for any occasion, so try this background with blues and purples or bright oranges and yellows and create a variety of garden-style backgrounds for your future card projects.